No, no, no.
I mean, it is a piece of sort of masterful theatre.
It is our purpose to retain the power and influence of this House.
There is a line between her Bruges speech, between the no, no, no in Parliament and Brexit.
And not to denude it of many of the powers.
She was talking to and taunting the party opposite.
For the sake of agreeing, for the sake of being little Sir Echo and saying me too.
Talking to the outside world.
I do not want the Commission to increase its powers against this House.
She was talking to her own backbenchers to say that this is my view on Europe, you've got to live with this. So the year's 1990, Margaret Thatcher is coming to the House of Commons to report back from a meeting that she's just had with her fellow European leaders, and she does what has ended up being one of the most dramatic moments, I think, of a Prime Minister in our recent political history, which is setting a very clear agenda for how she sees the relationship between the UK and Europe. And what we all know now is that in many ways this is the start of the final act for her as Prime Minister. The EU was sort of gearing up to have a conversation, or rather to set in process two conversations, one on political union for the EU and the other for what became economic and monetary union. And that was something that the British government, and Thatcher in particular, was not comfortable with.
All they do is to strand Britain in some European second division without the influence over change that we need, the industrial and financial opportunity that we need, and indeed without the real sovereignty that we need.
First, Mr. Speaker, it is our purpose to retain the power and influence of this House and not to denude it of many of the powers. I wonder what the Right Honourable Gentleman's policy is in view of some of the things he said. Would he have agreed to a commitment to extend the community's powers to other supplementary sectors of economic integration without having any definition of what they are? Would he? Because you would have thought he would from what he said. One of them was that the Commission wants to extend its powers and competence into the area of health. We said no, we weren't going to agree to those things. And what he says, he sounded as if he would, for the sake of agreeing, for the sake of being little Sir Echo and saying me too.
I think one of the things I really like about the speech is the way that she looks at the opposition, the way that she taunts the opposition, the way that she sets up a very, very different view of how her government wants to treat the European issue from the way that Neil Kinnock and the Labour Party wanted to. And why I think that's particularly cutting is not that long before Labour was committed to the idea of leaving the European community. And so, she, is in a way, as a subtext, I think, sort of reminding the Labour Party that they are very, very wobbly on the question of Europe. And she does it, I think, in an absolutely superb way. I mean, it is a masterclass in how to sort of hold Parliament in thrall and also to deliver a really effective and very, very cutting message.
Perhaps the Labour Party would give all those things up easily. Perhaps they would agree to a single currency, to total abolition of the pound sterling. Perhaps being totally incompetent with monetary matters, they'd be only too delighted to hand over the full responsibility, as they did to the IMF, to a central bank. The fact is, they have no competence on money, no competence on the economy, so yes, the Right Honourable Gentleman would be glad to hand it all over. But what is the point in trying to get elected to Parliament only to hand over your sterling and to hand over the powers of this House to Europe?
Margaret Thatcher had a really interesting political journey on Europe because she campaigned she was in favour of Britain joining the then European Economic Community. She campaigned in the 1975 referendum.
It will be a splendid and decisive yes for Britain in Europe.
But she had a very different idea as to how Europe's individual states should fit together. And as we know, I mean, she was a very strong believer in British national identity, a particular conception of Britain's place in the world, and all of those things for her were at odds with the idea of building up, as she saw it, a European superstate. So yes, she was a pro-European, but she had a very, very different vision of Europe from other European political leaders. There is a line between her Bruges speech, between the no, no, no in Parliament and Brexit, because British politicians and members of the public just took a different view of what kind of Europe they wanted. And so she really is the originator, I think, of the Brexit process.
To our Commissioner Leon Britton, he is of course a member of the Commission, he is a loyal member of the Commission. Yes, the Commission does want to increase its powers. Yes, it is a non-elected body, and I do not want the Commission to increase its powers against this House. So of course we are differing.
I think what makes it so memorable is Prime Ministers are not that categorical normally. I mean, if you look at the delivery of the speech, if you look at her body language, if you look at the intonation, I mean, it is a piece of sort of masterful theatre. I mean, it's sort of, in that arena, in the House of Commons, which is, theatrical, which is a stage. I mean, she was bringing everything into play in terms of making the point that she wanted to make. And it wasn't a position that she could retreat from. So she was talking to the outside world, she was talking to other European leaders and drawing what was for her, a very clear and unambiguous red line. She was talking to and taunting the party opposite, the Labour Party, the shadow opposition front bench led by Neil Kinnock. And I think she was talking to her own backbenchers as well as members of her cabinet on the front benches to say that, basically this is my view on Europe. You've got to live with this. Or not, and obviously the party in the end decided not to.
Of course, the chairman or the president of the Commission, Mr. Delors, said at press conference the other day that he wanted the European Parliament to be the democratic body of the community, he wanted the Commission to be the executive, and he wanted the Council of Ministers to be the Senate. No, no, no.
Unfortunately, her vision of Europe and her vision of the European community and how it could develop was really at odds with many people in her party. I mean, after she made that no, no, no statement in the House of Commons, her Deputy Prime Minister resigned, there was a leadership contest, and she lost the premiership. So, she was obviously a conviction politician on something that she felt so strongly about. She was very unlikely to be equivocal, but ultimately I think she found it impossible to square her view of how Britain should fit into Europe with what at that time was the view that prevailed within her cabinet and I think within the party at large. But in a way it's a sort of back to the future in that her idea of Europe and her idea of Britain's relationship with Europe is ended up being the predominant view within the Conservative Party now. So in a way, it's a curious legacy. She lost the premiership, but in a way she sort of captured the hearts and minds of members of the Conservative Party. And that's why we've ended up with the relationship that we have between the UK and the European Union now.